What is up, people? It is Jahid, aka Heedy the Scribe. Thank you for tuning in with me today. Super happy to be here and peep. I don't know if you can see it, but peep the Warriors jersey. Jersey shirt. We're kind of trash this year, but it's whatever. I'm getting ready to go to the gym. That's why I have this thrown on. But today, on this Happy Friday, I kind of just wanted to wax poetic a little bit about just writing. I'm in a muse kind of mood. So I wanted to just talk about craft, kind of share some of my insights, talk about my process, some of my systems, and hopefully be able to give some value and just some kind of general advice that can hopefully be applicable to your writing and your creative practice. So with that being said, let's just kind of dive right into it. And one of the first things I want to kind of address is this idea or this exploration of what does it mean to be disciplined with your creative practice. And I've found that discipline is oftentimes inaccurate for what creatives need. We need less discipline and more devotion. You know what I mean? So when I say that, the reason why I kind of have this interesting relationship around the idea of discipline is because a lot of times in on social media and kind of in the world at large, when people talk about discipline, they speak of it in a way where it's less about systems and more about just kind of raw willpower. You know what I mean? Like it's folks who are like, man, doesn't matter how you feel, you got to get up same time every day, 1 hour of sleep, you got to grind, you got to go to the gym, you got to hustle, 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 hustle. And the problem with that kind of modality and way of approaching things is it's kind of twofold. First, it's so daunting that the fear of not doing it properly makes people too afraid to want to even attempt it in the first place. And another significant issue with this kind of approach, like this mentality, is it's just not sustainable. Trying to rely on raw willpower 100% of the time is not going to be possible for the majority of the population. It's just not that's just not a sustainable metric to use because willpower can wax and wane depending on our mental state and just where we're at in our life right now. For me, for example, the amount of willpower that I have when it comes to going to the gym, like I'm about to do right now, it fluctuates because some nights I get a good 8 hours of sleep, I feel great, and some nights I get like an hour, and I cannot and I think the problem with a lot of like mainstream, well, Western mainstream, I like really red pill like ideas of discipline is it doesn't allow any room of flexibility. You will have these people who expect you to show up to a workout that demands 8 hours worth of sleep. It requires energy that's cultivated from 8 hours to sleep, regardless of how much energy you have. So they want you to give an 8 hours of sleep performance when you're running off of 3 hours worth of energy. And that's kind of the problem. There's no, like I said, there's no flexibility. And the issue with that is it doesn't give people the space to feel like they can kind of be human and not be perfect all of the time. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog, but my dog barking. She's crashing out a little bit. And that's kind of the thing with discipline. Discipline isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. It's not about showing up the same way every single day. It's about showing up every single day for where you are in that moment with the particular tools that you have available to you. So if that means you only have an hour and yesterday you had 6 to write, then that's completely okay because you showed up today. That's what's important, right? So kind of piggybacking off of that in this idea of systems is it's going to require a little bit of introspection and reflection to take a look at your own lifestyle and see what's going to be suitable for you and your goals to kind of figure out what systems do you need and what are going to help you thrive as a writer and not even just a writer, as a creative. So I know I scratch my nose a lot in these videos. I don't know why. They always get itchy as soon as I sit down and talk. But when I say systems, here's what I mean. For me, I have figured it out, right? So on my worst possible writing day, on a day where I'm like dog shit tired, or the words just aren't flowing, or I don't know what a scene needs to be, or all of these other possible factors that make it really difficult for me to show up and show out on the page, I know that if I have to kind of white knuckle it through the writing process, I can get out about 3 pages on my absolute worst day. However, if you slide that scale to the other end of the spectrum, I know on my best day, I can get about 9 pages in because as you can see, hopefully you can see, I write by hand, right? I can talk about this more a little bit later if y'all want, or maybe I will in this video. I don't know. I'm just kind of flow state right now, stream of consciousness. But anyway, I know that I can get 9 pages on my best day. On average, I sit somewhere around 5 to 6 pages. So what does this mean? I think of it like this. So I know that in a month, let's say 31 days, if I write 3 pages every single day, because I write every single day, if I write only 3 pages, 3 pages times 31, that means at the low end, I can write 93 pages. Let's say it's a killer month. I write 9 pages every single day. That's 279 pages. Okay, so what does this mean? This means I know that in a month I can expect to write between 93 and 279 pages. This is a system that takes so much pressure off of me to be perfect because I know the least I'm capable of doing when I just don't have the energy for it. And I also know what I'm able to produce at my highest possible level. So I give myself the space to explore and find a rhythm between that. You know what I mean? So on average, I can generally get out like anywhere between 5 to 7 pages. That's kind of my average. So I know at the end of the month, I'll be sitting somewhere in the middle, right? And it's still production, it's still me putting out an output, and it's a system that allows me to consistently show up because I know I have created something that's going to accommodate my potential fluctuations in energy, right? And I'm still showing up. I'm still writing, I'm still doing something, and I'm okay with these numbers because I know, hey, 3 pages may be my bare minimum, but it's better than zero, right? So all that is to say is, what does that look like for you? You might not be someone who counts pages. You might be a time kind of person. You might know that on your busiest day of the week, you got 15 minutes tops, right? And you might know on your most chill day, nothing's going on, you can bang out 2.5 hours. Okay, what does that mean? That means you can expect to write between 15 minutes to 2 hours every single day, right? Somewhere in there. And as long as you do that, you will consistently show up and make progress. Does that make sense? Like I think of it almost like I mentioned earlier, it's less of a discipline and it's more of a devotion. I'm a little neuro spicy boy, right? So for me, I I'm someone who craves structure, but if that structure is too rigid, I'm going to break from it. That's why the get up at well, no, that's not necessarily true. Some things I can do, like getting up in the morning at the same time. I can do that. That's not difficult for me. But if it's like Stephen King says in Writing on the Craft, he has this ideology. I don't know if it's changed over the decades or not, but he believes that if you want to be a successful writer, you need to write 10 pages a day and read for at least 4 hours a day, ignoring the fact that he was, coked the fuck out when he was writing a lot of his books. That, again, if that's something that you know you can do, if 10 pages is your bare minimum and you know that on a really good day you can bang out 25, okay, that works for you. But I think the thing is our systems need to be highly personalized to us because all of us are different. We can't measure or judge our success or the quality of our writing or our own practices by other people's. We can derive inspiration from them, but we can't really compare them because we're all different. You know what I mean? Like to someone else's, 3 pages might seem like a lot, 3 pages might seem like a little bit, but that's what I know I can put out at the bare minimum. And it also helps me to figure out a timeline with regards to my books, right? So I've gotten pretty good at gauging this over the years, and I kind of have a general idea of when I sit down to write a thing, roughly how long it will take me. Not, okay, let me back up. Not how long it'll take me. I can have an idea of how long it should be. And I have like in my head a number that I shouldn't go over because I outline for months before I start writing. And based on the outline and the genre, I can be like, okay, this probably shouldn't be more than like 400 pages or 550 pages. So using my formula, I can know, I was like, okay, let's say when I sit down to write this book, let's say I write 3 pages every single day until it's done. how many days will it take me to get to, say, 550 pages at max? Okay, I have this number. Let's say I write 9 pages every single day until the book is done. How many days will that take me? And based off of that, I can say, okay, cool. I can expect to finish this book between X amount of months and X amount of months. And now I'm able to have a schedule. Does that make sense? So I think it's just something to experiment with, to reflect, to kind of journal about, to see what resonates with you. And kind of like segueing out of this a little bit, something else I've been really wanting to talk about is a lot of times when I have conversations with writers or I see writers talking, something folks tend to say a lot is they don't have time to write. They don't have time. I That has always felt a little disingenuous to me, because when you add up all of the dead space moments we have in our day, like watching YouTube while you eat, or sitting on the toilet, or driving a car, or those moments when you're doom scrolling or downtime, there are definitely opportunities to show up and do something every single day. None of us are so busy that we can't spare 5 minutes. What I think is a bit more accurate to say is it's usually one of two things. Either we don't have the bandwidth to do something, or something isn't important enough for us to prioritize. And both of those are completely valid. But I think if the issue is we're struggling to get started writing, I think you have to really be honest about the reason why you aren't in the first place. Because not writing because it's not a priority right now is not the same thing as not writing because you don't have the bandwidth. Those two can go hand in hand, but not always. You can want to prioritize something and not have the energy for it. And at the same time, you can have the energy for something and just not consider it a priority. So I think getting to kind of the root of that will help you show up to the page and understand, okay, for example, if something isn't a priority right now, you just may not be called to write, and that's perfectly okay. You might have an idea for a story, but it's not consuming you. You're not in that space of like possession, right? And when I say possession, I mean it's like when a story just kind of grips you, and it's less of a I want to write and more of like I have to write, and if you don't write, you'll go insane kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I just think like sitting with yourself, being honest, exploring that, holding space for either option, regardless of where you're at, is equally important. But to say you don't have time, like I've had to catch myself on it recently, because I'll say I don't have time for something, then I'll be straight up and then be like, no, this just isn't that important to me right now. And that's okay, because it's allowing me to be honest with myself. So all of that, I'm kind of all over the place here. Just bear with me. Something else to consider as you sit down to start drafting a novel is to be aware of the drafts you can expect to experience. I think of it like this, in that the very first draft you write is all about perception. It is you perceiving the story, or this idea of the story, because at this early of a stage, you don't have a story yet. You have the bones of one, and then just getting it out. That's draft one. Draft two is, okay, this is think. This is, what do you think needs to happen? You know what I mean? This is like, okay, you've got the story out. I think I should move this paragraph here. I think I should cut out this chapter. I think this character should have this arc. I think this section of dialogue should be transitioned to earlier in part two, right? This is what you think, right? Part three is usually where you incorporate the aid of proofreaders or beta readers or an editor, because this is the stage of need. Okay, cool. You've perceived the story. You have what you think. And now you're at a place you're like, okay, cool. What do I need? And at this point, what you need is someone who is not as close to the story as you are. That's where editors come in, right? Someone who's able to look at it with a bird's eye view and a level of objectivity that a writer just doesn't have, because they are too close to the story. They're just too close to see it without their bias. You know what I mean? And after you go through editing, which can be, it is as humbling as it is transformative. And I am of the persuasion that you cannot get to the final stage or that final draft without editing, which I think is knowing. And that's the last stage. It's like, okay, you've perceived the story. You already know what you think happens. You know what you need, but now you know what the book actually is. And I do not think, I'm of the persuasion that it is not impossible, because I don't want to use that word in the creative space, right? But I think it is very difficult to know what a story is if you have not dissected it. And I don't think a story can be dissected the way it needs to be unless someone who is not the author of the thing shows you where you need to kind of go through and pick it apart and peel back the layers, right? Think of it like human anatomy. You can't understand the inner workings of the body until you peel back the epidermis, the musculature, get to the bones, the nervous system, all of that. A story is the same way. And that's why editing is so beautiful, because it allows you to kind of go through and get your hands dirty and figure out, oh, okay, this is actually what I'm trying to write. This is what I'm trying to say. This is kind of the phase where you start to get to the why of your story, right? And it's very difficult, even for someone who is as heavy an outliner as I am. It's difficult to get to that why at the beginning of a novel, because writing is less writing and more discovering. You will discover and unearth parts of the story and the characters as you write it. Things will come to you that you just couldn't have planned for. That's why I say you can't really know what the story is until you've gone through those editing trenches a little bit and you've unearthed secrets and you've gotten to know these characters and you've gotten to know the world a little bit more, and you've gotten your hands dirty and you're able to sit with and answer those really complicated questions that are at the root of it. Why am I writing this? You know what I mean? And that's perfectly okay. And I think when it comes to like knowing, I think there's something of like a writing paradox a little bit, in that you are simultaneously like, it's I'm trying to think. I have it written down right here because I didn't want to forget it. Let me see. Oh, here we go. So this idea is, as a writer, you are not limited to only what you know, but at the same time, you are also restricted by what you don't know, right? So what does that mean? That means you don't have to necessarily experience a thing or go through a thing to write it. You know what I mean? This is going to be a crazy example, but Rick Riordan didn't have to go to a school for half-bloods, you know what I mean, to write Percy Jackson. He wasn't limited by his human non-godly existence to only write about other humans with non-godly existences. However, he did have to deepen his toolkit and expand his knowledge. He spent years having conversations with historians and scholars and experts in the field of Greek mythology, so that way he could write this story with a level of authenticity. Does that make sense? And I think that's kind of where writers can get stuck sometimes, in kind of that limbo of being aware of what they do know and also not knowing what they don't know, but also like within that, underestimating and overestimating themselves kind of at the same time. What I mean by that is, a lot of writers grapple with imposter syndrome and insecurity and questioning whether or not their words are good, or, oh my God, why do I even think I can write a book? This is trash, burn it, set it on fire, lock me up for even making the attempt, right? And I think the reason for that on a deeper level is kind of twofold, in that one, we don't trust ourselves, and two, we don't necessarily think we're worthy of the story that we want to we're not worthy to write the story we want to tell. And I think sometimes this imposter syndrome, I think while it's a universal experience, I think it can be kind of compounded in writers who may not necessarily share the philosophy that I have, which is that writers don't choose stories, stories choose people. And my ideology is that stories come to us when we are ready to receive them. And they come to us specifically, right? They see us for all the trauma, all the heartbreak, all the imperfection, all the beauty, all the joy, all the hopes, all the fears. And they see us and they recognize us and they decide, you are the best person who can do justice by this world and its people. And then that story comes to you, because we are the vessel meant to express the ideas in this world that is so much bigger than us, right? And that's kind of like that feeling of being worthy, of being chosen. If the story wanted someone else, it would have chosen someone else. And for me, that's one of those things that kind of helps me in those moments of imposter syndrome, because I have to remember, I did not go looking for this story. It came to me and it gripped me and it has possessed me since December of 2023. And as I'm making this video, it's January 31st, 2025. So basically February. So that's something really important to remember, that if you're ever questioning yourself, remember, this book chose you and no one else, and there's a reason for that. Now, at the other end of this, there are writers who, for some reason, think that they do not need to expand their knowledge to write a thing. And you have examples of this, like in books. I don't want to give the names of any specifics because I just don't know any. I've heard about it, but I haven't verified it for myself. And I don't want to give y'all hearsay. But there have been cases of writers who will create a language by Frankensteining two other languages. They'll take like the prefix of Italian and they'll mix it with like the suffix of like Hossa or something like that. And then boom, that's their language. And that to me is an example of being limited by what you don't know, because you should not be combining languages if you speak neither. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what you could potentially be saying. You could be calling somebody's mom all kinds of hoes and shit, you know, when you are messing around with languages and stuff like that. And then folks who don't want to do research. I think it was like Rebecca Yarros who got dragged on social media because of the way she represented or misrepresented the Gaelic language. It's people think that everything that they have in their brain is enough to write the book. And some folks just aren't willing to do the level of research and immersion that it takes to be able to write something genuinely and authentically when it is outside of what they know. I use myself for an example, right? I'm writing my current book called Kalita's Garden, has to deal with two sisters who get turned into vampires, but the circumstances by which they get turned into these vampires has to do with a global superpower invading their nation, colonizing them, and then eventually they get oppressed with the end goal of militarizing the vampire population on the continent. So, this is an example. I am not limited by what I know in the sense that I can write about these sisters and these vampires and these cruel and callous soldiers. However, I also am aware of the fact that I am not an expert in the historical context and consequences of what it means to be a people who are occupied by a foreign nation and what are the centuries and generational implications of that. So because of that, I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks from the perspectives of historians and people who have researched these topics heavily, so I will be able to write it with a level of authenticity so it doesn't read like a 23 soon to be 24-year-old kid who was just making shit up as he goes, right? That's kind of being aware of what you don't know. And I had a choice there. I could choose to expand my knowledge, or I could just try to wing it and play it by ear and just, fuck it. Which, again, and whatever choice you choose to make, you have to live with the consequences that kind of come from that. But I am enjoying the research process. It's been a bit, because of the nature of what I'm having to write, it's been very heartbreaking, but it's also deeply informative. And that's just kind of like a reminder to be aware of what you do know, but also be aware of what you don't know. And don't be afraid to admit you don't know something. That doesn't make you stupid, it makes you curious. And there's nothing wrong with curiosity and being willing to learn. None of us will ever reach a point where we have learned everything we possibly need to learn in this human experience. So I think I've been yapping long enough. This is my little writer musings type thing. I hope you got something from this and this was like helpful in some capacity. I think the next video I'll do might be like a writer vlog or something like that. We'll see, but hopefully you got some value from this, and I would love to hear your own opinions and thoughts on your relationship with craft in the comments. But yeah, hope y'all enjoyed this. This is going to be Jahid, He the Scribe, signing out, and now I gotta get this work out. Peace out, y'all.